Hi, everybody. Welcome to the John Myer podcast. Now, today's topic is controlling cloud costs as it relates to backups. Before we get to our topic, how about we give our guest a chance to introduce himself?
Hi, my name's Sam Nicholls. I am Director of Public Cloud at Veeam Software. I've been with Veeam for about 8 years and have the privilege of working on pretty much every product in our portfolio. But for the last few years, I've been laser focused on AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, and really just excited to talk to you guys about what you can do to bring the cost of backup in the cloud down so you can then go and reinvest that in other areas that will propel your business forward.
Sam, everybody wants backups. Nobody wants to manage them. Nobody wants to deal with them. They don't want to delete them, but they don't want to test them, right? So there's a huge cost associated with them. Let's talk about what the cloud cost looks like as it relates to backups. And we can kind of generalize it. I mean, we can speak Veeam language, right, on backups and utilizing it. But really, let's talk about cloud and backups.
Yeah. I think actually you mentioned a really good point. Firstly, is like nobody wants to manage it, right? It's just like insurance. It's something that you know that you have to do, and boy, are you thankful when you need it that it's there, but definitely not something that you want to be doing every single day. And as cloud engineers, cloud architects, we know the need to build that resiliency and availability, and how backup has its place in that into our strategy. But certainly managing it is a bit of a pain, and I think we can riff on that a little bit later. But as it pertains to costs, just like everything in the cloud, we're looking at everything from a pay-as-you-go, pay-for-what-you-use model, right? So backup, there's going to be compute required, often networking, and then, of course, storage. So what we want to do is make sure that we have the right data protection strategy in place for our business, making sure that we align our service level objectives with the needs of those applications without overspending, because anyone can, take a snapshot and retain it for 5 years, but that's going to be very costly. So there's a number of best practices that should be followed in order to bring those costs down.
Well, let's talk about those best practices, because I can take a snapshot and keep it for 5 years, but there's some challenges. One is, do I need this snapshot for 5 years? Can I get rid of it sooner or later? I think the biggest thing with backups, and if you even talk about it in a traditional sense, is testing out your backups, right? I can take it, but I don't know if it works. I don't know if the recovery works. You know what? I have a peace of mind that I have a backup, but it hasn't been fully tested. What are some of the best practices, not only as it relates to having backups for cloud, cost savings, availability, and testing?
Yeah, so let's look at it from the cost angle first, right? We spoke about snapshots. They live on some of the most expensive storage that's available in the cloud. We're here at Reinvent. Let's talk about it from an AWS perspective. If we're protecting, let's say, an EC2 instance, the snapshot of the EBS volume, depending on what region you're in, is around 5 cents per gig per month. Doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're taking multiple snapshots a day of multiple gigabytes, terabytes, sometimes even petabytes, as you get into those larger organizations, it starts to get expensive and add up really quickly. And then remember, it's per month. So when that's being retained for months or years, that adds up very, very quickly. So what we need to do is turn to other more cost-effective storage options that are available on AWS, like Amazon S3 and the multiple different tiers that are available, and tier that snapshot off. Now, we make a trade-off on that, right? Snapshots are very, very good at achieving low RTOs and RPOs, recovery time objectives, very, very quickly to recover from. But as that ages, and the likelihood of needing to recover from that snapshot diminishes, we can safely make that trade-off of putting it on less performant object storage, right the way down to things like Glacier Deep Archive, because we're trading up the 5 cents per gig per month to something that's a fraction of a cent per gig per month. So that's the key piece, is just making sure that, yes, you can have your cake and eat it. You can meet your retention requirements, but just balancing the different storage types to keep that cost low.
Well, let's talk about that from a Veeam perspective. How am I able to make those trade-offs? How am I able to manage that from a Veeam perspective? Because we all know we can do this in the AWS console, but it takes a person to manage everything and all accounts and visibility through everything. But I know Veeam has this capability for you to manage that and move storage around, kind of archive things automatically without having to worry about and to save those costs.
Yeah, absolutely. So our product that's built for protecting data that is on AWS uses policy-based automation. So what we see is a number of organizations will create different policies that align to different service level objectives, right? So we might have like a diamond, a gold, silver, and bronze tier, and each one has different scheduling and different retention and different tiering automations associated with that. And then as you start to spin up workloads on AWS, you can use things like tags, or maybe even just anything within that account gets that policy associated with it. You don't have to lift a finger. So maybe we have a mission critical workload. We take a snapshot every single hour. Maybe we'll retain those snapshots for a week, but after that, we'll then take an image-based backup, store that on Amazon S3, maybe for a few months. As it ages further, we'll put that onto S3 Glacier, further along S3 Glacier Deep Archive, and it's fully automated. You don't have to do anything.
Sam, you know as much as I do that every business owner and application says that their app has a service level objective that needs to meet like a diamond level, right? I need immediate restore, I need stuff. How are you helping though customers understand that this dev test application doesn't need to be, backed up all the time and curb some of those costs?
Yeah, it's a good question. And it's a difficult one, right? Because every organization is different, and everyone thinks that their application is the most important one on the planet. But I think it's really just understanding which ones are critical to keeping the business running, right? The customer-facing applications, ones that take payments, things like that, keep your website running. I would say that those are the mission-critical ones. But dev test workloads absolutely can have a lower RTO, RPO service level objective associated with it. And I think it's just understanding what your tolerance for data loss is and what your tolerance for downtime is. Again, a customer-facing web application, maybe something that takes payments, tolerance for downtime is very, very minimal. Tolerance for data loss is very minimal. So we're going to have a more aggressive SLO associated with that. But again, something that's on the back end, dev test, yes, still important, but the business can survive for longer with it being down.
Sam, I had the pleasure of installing Veeam a number of times, doing a couple of workshops, and not to brag or anything about it, is that one of the policies, when you run through the policy stuff, one of the actual tabs shows you the cost associated with implementing this policy. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of my favorite features, and certainly one of the features that a lot of our users love as well, because bill shock is real, right? Again, like backup is consuming compute. There's often API calls, there's storage costs, there's network traffic transaction costs. And calculating that yourself is very, very difficult.
It's not even possible. I don't know anybody that can sit there and pull and calculate it, because it's all of I need to pull this line. Oh, this is the data transfer. Nobody takes data transfer into a consideration.
I don't think anyone wants to do
Okay,
it, right?
definitely not me.
But certainly, like within the policy model, as you're building out the policy, Veeam is looking at the data and then what the policy is saying, and then we cross-reference that with the AWS list prices for the region or regions that this is taking place in, and we'll proactively forecast that on a monthly basis for you. We'll give you what we forecast the total cost to be, and then we'll break that down into transactions, traffic, compute, storage, and everything. And that just really helps organizations avoid that bill shock, right? Because I've worked with a number of organizations that go out, they'll use just a snapshot-only based product, and they have that bill shock. They're like, this is costing me tens, sometimes even hundreds of thousands a month. Veeam can help you forecast that and better align those RPOs and RTOs with the budgets that you have.
Well, when you look at the Veeam console, there are a number of things that you can back up. One of the biggest thing is your VPC data, right? And I have advocated so much and said that you guys are awesome at this, because nobody thinks about your VPC configuration. It's a very simple one. Click a button, you're on, and you're doing it. But how does that associate with anything with cost or cost optimization? Where does that translate into the backups of having this data available for me for my VPC that is a production workload?
Yeah, well, firstly, I'll just say that we don't charge for the VPC backup. It's completely free, and it's just,
There's the cost there. All right, that answers the question.
Yeah, it's completely free, but again, like you say, it's often overlooked. Like there's hundreds of attributes within a VPC, and multiple organizations have multiple VPCs, and someone could go in, change a single attribute, and bring everything crashing down. Veeam can protect it, and like I say, do it for free. It's not a huge amount of data, so the storage cost is minimal. But from a restore perspective, we've got multiple different options. You can just completely restore the entire VPC. You can restore an individual attribute. But my favorite is just the comparison, right? You can say at this point in time, my environment was working, so let's click this restore point, and it will just compare it and tell you proactively it's this one that's changed. And again, you can just make that change yourself or restore that individual attribute and bring everything back up online.
Speaking of restore, does Veeam have the capability to restore, say, an instance at an instance level or a snapshot faster? Do you have the option to restore faster or slower, given the cost associated with it? Or when the restore happens, do you spin up like the biggest instance and you restore my stuff and then you shut down everything?
Yeah. I mean, we like to put the power in the hands of the user, right? So again, aligning with those service level objectives, what's your tolerance for downtime? You could, when we perform a restore, we spin up something called a worker, and a worker lives on an EC2 instance, and it's taking that image-based backup, rehydrating it, and doing the restore, right? You could throw an expensive, performant EC2 instance at that, or you could use something that is less expensive and less performant. And of course, it's going to take longer to restore, but maybe that's okay. Again, the flexibility is there throughout the entirety of the product.
Depending on your SLA that you need to restore. If I need this back in 2 minutes versus an hour, you have to kind of associate the cost. So using an instance that costs maybe $10 for an hour versus $2 in the hour, what's the business need behind it?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not just entire instances as well. We go down to the individual files and folder level as well. So oftentimes it's not an entire instance that needs to be restored. It's an individual folder, it's an individual file. So we make the search for that individual file very, very easy. It's just kind of like Spotlight if you're a Mac user. I can't even remember what it's called on Windows because I never even use Windows.
Explorer. Windows Explorer. Listen, I used to be a Windows user.
But it's like Spotlight functionality, right?
Yep.
So, you remember a certain part of the file name, type it in, there it is, and you can just restore that individual file. You can put it in place of where it originally was, or you can just download it to the machine that you're accessing the web UI from.
I think the FLR, the file level restore, is one of the best features besides the VPC. Is you get an instance, you do the restore, but it brings up a browser, so it's within the Veeam interface. You click on the browser and you can actually go through and find the file you want and restore individual files. You can download them, right? So you can recover them quicker and ultimately, or restore to original location.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. We use the AWS Kinesis technology to insert it back to where it was originally, or again, like you say, just download it locally.
So the cost associated with restore is all dependent upon the need of the business on how quick they need it.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's costs associated everywhere, right? We mentioned that we're spinning up the EC2 instance and the flexibility you have to optimize for performance or optimize for cost. But we've also got to consider things like data retrieval fees as well. There's no data retrieval fees with a snapshot, but there absolutely is with something that's like stored in S3 Glacier, Deep Archive. So, the fees aren't huge, but they're always there. And it's just something to be conscious about.
I got it, yeah. Now, let's talk about it a little bit more during the restore process. Something I learned, and I think this was, somebody had to run into this at one point and realized it. I was restoring something for FLR, and I like to multitask. So I brought it up, I want to restore it, and I went off and did something else for like an hour or 2 hours. I came back, and my restore and everything had stopped. There's no worker. There's nothing available. And I reached out to you. And I'm like, Sam, what is going on? What happened? Talk to me about that process, because I think that ultimately talks about the cloud cost savings that you implemented for busy engineers.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a deliberate thing, not a bug. So when we spin up that worker to run that file level recovery operation, it will live for 30 minutes or until the recovery has taken place. So if a recovery takes 5 minutes, it'll just automatically shut down. If it's idle for 30 minutes, we automatically shut down, because ultimately we just don't want an EC2 instance that's not performing an operation running and racking up charges. So
I think that was a great feature, something that, and you're right, it's not a bug, it's actually a cost saving method, because if I spun up one of the hugest instances out there costing me $100 an hour and I forgot about it, this is my personal one testing out, it's very cost conscious.
Absolutely.
Sam, let's talk about your availability between various hyperscalers, right? Because we all know they exist. what is your capability not only between like AWS but others?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we've been talking about AWS today, infrastructure as a service, EC2 platform as a service, so things like RDS. We spoke about the VPCs as well, EFS. We're bringing out S3 backup very, very soon as well, but that is also available for other hyperscalers as well. So Microsoft Azure, whether that's VMs, Azure SQL, Azure Files, Azure Blob, and also Google Cloud as well. So Compute Engine virtual machines, and then also the Cloud SQL databases. So Veeam is capable of protecting all of these, as well as kind of what people probably know us for, which is the on-premises component, right? The virtualized workloads on-prem, physical workloads on-premises. The value add really with Veeam is, yes, controlling costs, but also just helping to make a hybrid or multi-cloud backup environment much, much more efficient, much, much more cost-effective to manage by unifying and federating that under a single platform.
Talk to me about the upcoming S3 stuff that you're working on, if you can share anything.
Yeah, absolutely. So Veeam Backup Replication 12.1, it's our flagship product, and it's kind of the centralized management console of the AWS, Azure, Google piece. One of the features is object storage backup coming up, and that includes your S3 buckets. So you'll be able to take an S3 bucket and back it up to any Veeam supported repository. So it could be another S3 bucket. You could make that immutable if you would like as well from a security perspective. You could back it up to Azure Blob. You could back it up to an on-premises object storage bucket. I mean, really the data portability, and again, another big value of Veeam is we're as minimally prescriptive as possible and where things should live. It's just, here's the feature, you put it wherever you want.
With the data portability, what type of security do I naturally have? What's native?
So security is an interesting piece, and I think like a multi-layered security approach is obviously critical. And I think when we think about security, folks often look to the preventative piece, right? Stopping the bad actors from getting into my environment. But the thing that we've got to remember is they've got an unlimited number of attempts on your environment, and only have to be right once to get in. You have to be 100% right 100% of the time to keep them out. There is the remediative security component as well, and that's really where backup and recovery comes in. But you've got to make sure that that backup is secure. So doing things like a logical air gap, so looking at what are security boundaries within AWS. Okay, it's accounts. So doing things like cross-account backup, having a dedicated account for that backup to live in, I would say is critical. Managing the identity and access between those using IAM roles. Again, don't leave a big wide open hole, make sure it's very, very tight, and that you rotate those credentials, delete anything unnecessary on a routine basis. Immutability, kind of discuss that, placing things in Amazon S3, using object lock to make sure that it's in that write once, read many state. And other things like encryption as well. Exfiltration's on the rise, people taking data and extorting, saying, hey, we're going to post this personally identifiable information, company secrets, whatever it is, on the internet. If you don't pay us this ransom, if that data is encrypted, they can't access it easily.
Talk to me a little bit more about immutability backups. What is it? Why is it helpful, and how is it securing?
Yeah, absolutely. So we release a report every single year called our Data Protection Trends Report. We also do one called our Ransomware Trends Report. And 85% of organizations are showing that the backups are pretty much the primary target for cyber criminals, right? These cyber criminals know that I'm getting into the environment, but I'm not getting paid my ransom because they're just recovering from a clean backup. And that kind of brings it full circle with the testing as well. So they're attacking these backups. Putting backup in an immutable state, right? Write once, read many state means once that backup has been committed to Amazon S3 object storage, in this case, it cannot be changed, it cannot be deleted, it cannot be overwritten, it cannot be encrypted for a specified period of time, right? So if we know that we've got to retain this backup for 2 years, we set the immutability period for 2 years. Once that's been committed, it's there. Even AWS can't get rid of it.
I know a couple of companies that could have used this recently.
Yep. I mean, it's, I mentioned the multi-layered approach. Immutability is just critical now.
Well, before we wrap things up, we're here at AWS Reinvent. What's happening? What's going on for Veeam?
Yeah. So we're obviously on the expo floor. We kicked off yesterday evening, and it was crazy. It's big, right? Reinvent's back. I can remember the first one back after COVID, and I think it was like maybe 15,000 folks, and it was a good show, but it was definitely quite.
It didn't feel the normal Reinvent stuff.
No.
This is feeling the normal times 10.
Yeah, it's crazy, but booth traffic is fantastic. Lots of great conversations. Again, kind of centered on what we've been talking about today, right? How can I have my cake and eat it too when it comes to backup and controlling costs? What are you doing for me from a security perspective? What's some of the new things like we kind of just discussed? Mentioned S3, but also other new services that we'll be supporting, including things like DynamoDB. So lots of interest, and then we also have 3 breakout sessions throughout the show as well. If people kind of want to learn more and double click and get into the real techie stuff of the products.
You have a breakout session, right, going on?
I don't have one.
Oh no, you don't have one. I know Veeam has 3. I've actually highlighted them. Do you know when they're happening by any chance?
There is one happening today, one happening tomorrow, and one happening on Thursday. The exact times escape me right now.
That's all right. I put you on the spot, but they can always come to my channel, take a look at the YouTube. I've mentioned Veeam, tagged you on the sessions. Don't worry about it. Sam, I'm always looking forward to your conversations, your workshops, and some of the presentations that you do while you're at Reinvent. Though I do have something, can you talk to the folks what's coming up in December? We have a talk coming up. I want to put this on this recording because I want to highlight it, and it will be out before then. Can you quickly talk about that? Because you and I are going to be on the show again, not in this style, though.
No, it's going to be a webinar style. You'll be back on the East Coast. I'll be in the freezing Midwest, and from my home office with my 3 crazy children in the background, I'm sure. But yeah, we're going to be talking more about controlling costs, looking at best practices. We'll do some demos as well. So I think it's going to be a great show. Love working with you, John, and always love having these kind of conversations with you.
I agree, and I like how they scraped off my LinkedIn photo and put it on there. I was like, I'm keeping that. That's going to be the standard one for you guys.
Resourcefulness.
Definitely. Sam, thank you so much.
Thank you, John.
All right, everybody. This has been another awesome episode of the John Myer Podcast. Don't forget to hit that like, subscribe, and notify because guess what? We're out of here.